The shovel struck stone, and Jacob Harrow swore softly, wiping sweat from his lined brow. He stood in the shadow of his weathered cabin, staring into the half-dug crevice 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, the perfect size for a man who'd lost his reason to live. The Texas sun blazed down on the parched earth, relentless as ever, and Jacob had been at it since first light. His plan was simple: finish the hole by midday, pen a note willing his ranch to the bank, and then use his father's old Colt revolver to end 40 years of struggle. No kin to grieve him, no neighbors to notice his absence, just another broken soul in a land that ground dreamers to dust. The drought had wiped out his herd. The bank was circling, ready to foreclose. His wife, Clara, had succumbed to fever 3 winters back, taking their unborn son with her. What was left for a man who'd buried everything that mattered? Each shovelful of dirt was a step closer to his final rest, the hardpan ringing with his resolve. But then, a sound pierced the silence, a faint, trembling voice calling from the direction of his front gate. Jacob dropped the shovel and grabbed his Winchester, suspecting trouble. Land speculators had been sniffing around his property, offering pennies for land he'd poured his life into. He'd told them he wouldn't sell, but greed made men bold. Rounding the corner of his cabin, he froze. There, slumped against his splintered gate, was a young woman no more than 20, her tattered dress caked with dust and her auburn hair tangled. She was heavily pregnant, likely 8 months along, and barely conscious. Her lips twitched, forming silent words, one hand clutching her swollen belly. Blood stained her skirt, and her face was pale as frost. This wasn't a trick. This was a woman on the edge of death, and she'd stumbled onto the doorstep of a man who'd been digging his own grave. Jacob's heart lurched. The shovel he'd wielded for his own end might now be needed for hers. But first, he had to decide if he had enough left in him to help. Dropping his rifle, he ran to her, boots churning the dry earth. Up close, she looked even younger, her delicate features hinting at a life softer than the one that had brought her here. Her breathing was shallow, her forehead burning under his calloused hand. The blood on her dress told a grim story, and her baby was in danger. Time was slipping away. Without hesitation, Jacob lifted her, startled by how light she felt despite her condition. As he carried her toward the cabin, her eyes fluttered open, revealing hazel irises that pierced him with their intensity. Her voice, faint as a desert breeze, reached him. "Please," she whispered, "save my child." The words struck like a hammer. Here was a woman fighting for life while he'd been carving out his surrender. The irony wasn't lost on him as he laid her on his same bed, where he'd planned to write his final words. Jacob had delivered foals and calves, but never a human child. His hands trembled as he fetched water from the well and tore strips of cloth from Clara's old sewing kit. The girl's eyes were closed again, her breathing ragged, her body tensing with contractions. As he cleaned the blood and dirt from her face, he noticed something chilling: rope burns on her wrists and bruises on her arms, shaped like fingerprints. Someone had bound her, someone had hurt her, and somehow she'd escaped, finding her way to his isolated ranch. But that meant her pursuers might not be far behind. Jacob glanced at his windows, suddenly aware that his remote homestead, perfect for ending his life in solitude, now made them vulnerable. The girl's hand clamped onto his wrist, her eyes snapping open with panic. "They're coming," she gasped. "They said they'd find me no matter where I went." His mind raced. He'd thought his greatest dilemma was whether to live or die. Now, a pregnant girl was bleeding out in his bed, and unknown hunters were closing in. The grave out back seemed trivial compared to the storm brewing. He moved to the window, scanning the horizon for dust clouds or riders. The scrubland stretched endlessly, offering clear sightlines, but no cover. His ranch sat in a shallow basin, ringed by low hills that gave attackers the advantage. The girl gripped his wrist tighter, her voice strained but clear. "My name's Abigail," she said, struggling to sit up. "My father sold me to a man named Silas Redfern to settle his debts. But Silas, he's twisted." Jacob's blood ran cold. Every rancher from here to the Red River knew Silas Redfern, a cattle baron who owned half the water rights into counties. Whispers trailed him stories of missing women, unmarked graves, and sheriffs on his payroll. "He kept me locked in his manor for months," Abigail continued, anger edging out fear. Said the baby was his to raise, to mold in his image. But when labor started early, I ran. Stole a horse, rode till it collapsed, then walked here. The rope burns and bruise is made sense now. So did her choice of his ranch farthest outpost from Redfern's domain. A desperate bid for sanctuary. But Jacob knew men like Redfern didn't let go of what they claimed. Especially not a child they saw as theirs. A sharp contraction doubled Abigail over, her cry echoing in the cabin. Her water broke, soaking the mattress. The baby was coming, ready or not. And Jacob was now responsible for 2 lives instead of ending one. He eased her back, racking his brain for what Clara had taught him about childbirth. But something was wrong, too much blood, and Abigail's face was growing paler by the second. As if summoned by his dread, the sound of hoof beats reached multiple horses, riding hard. Jacob grabbed his rifle and peered out the window. 6 riders crested the nearest hill, moving with the precision of trained men. At their head was a figure from wanted posters, tall, gaunt, with gray hair and eyes like flint. Silas Redfern had come to reclaim what he saw as his, and he'd brought enough firepower to ensure no one stood in his way. Abigail's face contorted with another contraction, blood seeping faster now. She was fading, but her eyes burned with a mother's resolve. "Don't let him take my baby," she pleaded. Jacob's gaze shifted between her and the approaching riders. For months, he'd been consumed by his own despair. But Abigail had every reason to give up, betrayed by her father, brutalized by Redfern, hunted like prey, and yet she fought for her child's future. Something shifted in him, a spark reigniting in the ashes of his soul. "I promise," he said, the words carrying a weight he hadn't felt in years. "Your baby will be free." Redfern's men were closing in, their shadows stretching across the yard. Jacob's old cavalry instincts kicked in. The cabin's thick oak walls could stop bullets, but with only 2 windows and 1 door. It was a fortress or a trap. Then he remembered the grave out back and the shovel he'd left beside it. If Redfern's men saw it, they'd know he'd been planning to die. They'd use that against him, taunting his weakness. "Time's up, Harrow." Redfern's voice cut through the stillness, sharp and commanding. "Send out what's mine." A gunshot shattered the front window, glass spraying across the floor. Abigail screamed, not from the shot but from a contraction that seemed to tear her apart. Jacob dropped low, returning fire. His shot caught one rider, who slumped from his saddle, but as he reloaded, Abigail gasped. The baby's head was crowning, fighting to enter the world as her mother fought to stay in it. More shots peppered the cabin. Jacob was caught between 2 crises. If he left Abigail to fend off the attackers, she and the baby would die in childbirth. If he stayed to help, Redfern's men would break in and slaughter them all. But then a new sound broke through, a thin, piercing cry. The baby was born, alive against all odds. Jacob turned to see Abigail, unconscious, her breathing so faint it barely stirred the air. The baby, small but fierce, wailed with a strength that belied its size. But Abigail was slipping away, her life draining with every heartbeat. The smell of smoke hit him next. Orange light flickered outside as flames licked the cabin walls. Redfern's men were torching the place, determined to flush him out. "We're burning you out, Harrow," Redfern called, his voice cold with certainty. Jacob cleaned the baby's face and wrapped it in a clean shirt, his hands shaking. It was a girl, her tiny features echoing Abigail's. As he lifted her, Abigail's eyes opened one last time, focusing on her daughter. "Lily," she whispered. "Her name is Lily." Then her eyes closed, and she was gone. The cabin was filling with smoke, the heat growing unbearable. Lily's cries grew urgent, as if she sensed the danger. Jacob checked his ammunition, 3 rifle rounds, 2 pistol shots. Not enough to fight his way out, but maybe enough to give Lily a chance. The promise he'd made to Abigail burned in his chest. The back wall was ablaze, but there was one escape route Redfern might not know, a root cellar with a hidden exit behind the cabin, concealed by a rain barrel. If he could reach it, he might slip away and circle back to surprise the attackers. But leaving Abigail's body in the fire felt like a betrayal. She died to protect her child, and now her resting place would be ashes lit by her tormentor. Lily's blue eyes, Abigail's eyes met his, and he saw the same fire, that had driven her mother's fight. This child was Abigail's legacy, and Jacob would not let Redfern claim her. He kissed Abigail's forehead, whispering a prayer, then cradled Lily and moved toward the cellar. The roof creaked ominously, flames roaring above, but as he reached the trapdoor, footsteps sounded on the porch. Redfern's voice, closer now, dripped with menace. "Don't worry, my dear," he said, as if speaking to Abigail. "Papa's here to take you and the baby home. We'll raise my heir properly." He thought Abigail was alive, expecting to find a defenseless woman and child. Jacob saw his chance. He positioned himself behind the door, muffling Lily's cries, and waited. The front door creaked open, and Redfern's boots thudded on the floor, unhurried, confident. "Abigail, darling," he called, his tone sickeningly soft. "Where's my baby?" When Redfern saw Abigail's lifeless form, his voice turned venomous. "You fool," he snarled. "You'd rather die than be mine. But my child better be alive, or I'll burn every ranch from here to the border." Jacob stepped out, rifle aimed at Redfern's chest. The older man spun, hand twitching toward his pistol, but froze when he saw Lily in Jacob's arms. "Your child is safe," Jacob said, voice steady. "But she's not yours. She's free, born on free land." Redfern's eyes locked on Lily, a predator sizing up his prize. "Give me the baby, Harrow, and I might let you live. Defy me, and you'll beg for death." But Jacob's resolve was iron. He thought of Abigail's courage, of the grave he'd dug, of the life he'd nearly abandoned. "The only one leaving is this child," he said, "to a place where she'll grow up free." Redfern reached for his gun, but a burning roof beam crashed down, sparks and flame erupting between them. Jacob's shot was blocked, and through the smoke, he heard Redfern scrambling for the door, shouting to his men. Clutching Lily, Jacob dove for the cellar, the cabin collapsing around them. He emerged from the hidden exit, coughing, and found a sight that stunned him. 3 of Redfern's men lay unconscious, a 4th bound with his own rope. Standing over them, cigarette in hand, was Sheriff's Deputy Margaret Cole, the only law in the territory Redfern couldn't buy. "Evening, Jacob," she said, her smile sharp. "Heard you might need a hand." Margaret had been hunting Redfern for months, tracking a string of missing women and forged deeds. Abigail's escape had left a message with a servant, which reached Margaret 2 days ago. She'd ridden hard, writhing as the cabin burned. "Didn't expect to find a man ready to die for a stranger's child," she added, helping Jacob clear the flames. Redfern stumbled from the wreckage, his tailored suit charred, his composure fraying. Spotting Margaret's badge, he shifted to charm. "Deputy Cole, you're just in time. This man kidnapped my adopted daughter and her child. I have the papers." Margaret didn't blink. "Those papers were coerced from a desperate father. I've got witnesses, including the girl who died in that fire to escape you." Redfern's mask slipped, rage flashing through. "You can't prove anything," he spat. "My word against a dead girl's." "Don't need her word," Margaret said. "You just admitted she was running. That's kidnapping, imprisonment, and now murder." Fear flickered in Redfern's eyes. A man unused to consequences. He drew his pistol, but Margaret was faster, her shot dropping him before he could fire. Silas Redfern fell, his empire of terror crumbling in the dust. In the silence, Lily's cries softened, her blue eyes taking in the world. Margaret looked at Jacob, respect in her gaze. "What now?" "This little one needs a home, and word was you were ready to check out for good." Jacob held Lily close, thinking of the grave he'd started that morning. It belonged to his old life now. "I'll finish that grave," he said. "But for Abigail, where Lily can visit her mother someday. After that, we build a life worth living." The sun dipped below the hills, casting a golden glow over the scorched land. Margaret helped Jacob gather supplies for the trip to town, where Lily needed a doctor, and he'd begin adoption papers. The ranch, once a symbol of loss, now held promise a place to raise a girl who'd know her mother's courage and the value of freedom. As they rode out, Jacob realized the shovel that had nearly buried him had unearthed something greater, a chance to be the father he'd never had, to a daughter who'd never know Redfern's shadow, but would grow up with the man who'd chosen to save her. What do you think? This story wrestles with heavy themes: violence, injustice, and the fight for redemption. Did Jacob's choice to protect Lily resonate with you? How do you view the role of violence in confronting evil like Redfern? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's discuss where you stand on these tough questions.